On my 20th birthday, my parents threw me out onto the street with nothing but a duffel bag and a $50 bill, calling me a good-for-nothing mistake. Exactly 7 years later, I stood inside my home office, watching my security monitors as those same two people stood at my front gate, broken, bankrupt, and begging for mercy. They had absolutely no idea that the wealthy tech mogul whose help they were desperately seeking was the very same daughter they had left to freeze in the dark. My name is Pamela. Today, I'm standing in the absolute quiet of my home office, my eyes completely fixed on the large security monitor mounted on the wall. The high-definition camera clearly displays my front gate, where two figures are standing, looking utterly desperate. As I zoom in on their faces I once knew better than anyone, I can see the raw fear in their eyes. The expensive designer clothes they used to obsess over now hang loosely from their emaciated bodies. Behind them sits a cheap, dusty rental car. My mother, Vivian, is wringing her hands nervously, while my father, Henry, just stares blankly at the gravel below. My head of security, Leo, breaks the silence through the intercom. His voice is calm and measured. "Ma'am, they claim it's a family emergency. They say they've lost absolutely everything. Do you want me to have them removed from the property?" I watch my mother on the screen. She seems so incredibly small now. A cold, precise smile spreads across my face. I have been waiting for this exact alignment of fate for 7 years. "No, Leo," I reply calmly. "Open the gate. They have no idea who lives here. To understand how we got to this gate, you have to go back to that fateful day." I grew up in a well-to-do family, firmly entrenched in the upper-middle-class social circles. My father was a successful banker, permanently buried in his work and rarely home. My mother was completely obsessed with social status, appearances, and country club politics. Despite the hollow environment at home, I was a diligent student. I maintained a 3.9 GPA, led the school's environmental club, and spent my weekends volunteering at the local community center. I had massive dreams of attending a top-tier university to major in environmental science. My parents had always promised me that a college fund was set aside, assuring me that as long as my grades were flawless, my education would be fully covered. On the morning of my 20th birthday, I woke up with a surge of genuine excitement, expecting a warm family breakfast. But when I walked into the kitchen, it was freezing and empty. There was no cake, no cards, just the dull hum of the refrigerator. When my mother finally walked in, dressed in her pristine workout gear, she didn't even look at me as she went straight for the coffee maker. "Happy birthday," she said flatly, as if it were a chore. "Thanks," I replied, forcing a smile. "Is Dad up? Did the university acceptance letters arrive?" She paused, her coffee mug frozen halfway to her lips. When she turned to look at me, her eyes were entirely devoid of warmth. "We need to talk to you tonight. Be home at 7 o'clock sharp. Don't make any other plans." A heavy knot immediately formed in my stomach. I spent the rest of the day at school in a complete daze, unable to shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. At exactly 6:55 p.m., I walked through the front door. The house was eerily silent. In the living room, my father sat in his armchair, staring silently into a glass of whiskey, refusing to make eye contact. My mother stood rigidly by the fireplace, and right in the middle of the room sat an old duffel bag and a couple of plastic garbage bags stuffed with my clothes. My heart stopped. "What is this?" I asked, my voice trembling. Vivian stepped forward, her arms crossed tight. "You are 20 years old today. You are an adult, and our legal responsibility to you ends right here." I let out a nervous laugh, desperate for it to be a bad joke. "Mom, what are you talking about? What about college? What about my fund?" "There is no fund," she said coldly. "We spent it on a new investment. We decided our financial portfolio was far more important than your degree." I was in complete shock. "But, how am I supposed to go to school?" "You're not," she snapped. "At least, not on our dime." She then reached into her pocket, pulled out a piece of paper, and callously threw it at my feet. It was my birth certificate. But under the section for the father's name, the line belonged to a stranger. "You were a mistake," she whispered with venom. "An affair I had 20 years ago. Henry only agreed to raise you to keep up appearances in our social circle. But the charade is over. I looked at the man I had called my father my entire life, pleading with my eyes for him to tell me it was a lie. He finally looked up, his face lined with exhaustion. "You should just go, Pamela," he murmured. "Go where?" I screamed, tears blinding me. "I have nowhere to go. No money, no housing, nothing." Vivian walked over to the entryway table, grabbed the small stack of cash, and forcefully shoved it into my hand. "Here, $50. That is all you are getting from this house. Now, get out. If you are not off our property in 10 minutes, I am calling the police." I grabbed my garbage bags and stumbled out onto the front porch. The heavy oak door slammed shut behind me, followed by the definitive click of a deadbolt. I stood there sobbing, pounding on the glass, begging them not to do this. But the porch light snapped off, leaving me completely alone in the dark. The only asset I owned was an old, beat-up car I had bought with my own part-time money. I drove aimlessly through the night, terrified, eventually pulling into a secluded parking lot to sleep. The next morning, I went to my shift at the local bookstore, desperate for some sense of normalcy. But my boss, Mr. Thompson, looked deeply uncomfortable the moment I walked in. "Pamela, I'm incredibly sorry, but I have to let you go," he said, avoiding my gaze. "Your mother called me this morning. She told me you've been stealing thousands from the family and that you are mentally unstable. I can't take that risk with my business." I was completely shattered. She hadn't just evicted me, she was actively trying to destroy my reputation so I couldn't survive. Desperate, I drove to my Aunt Rose's house, my mother's sister, believing she would see through the madness. But when she answered, she only opened the door a fraction of an inch, her face pale with fear. "You can't be here, Pamela," Rose whispered frantically. "Your mother called the entire family. She said if any of us help you, she will immediately sue me for the historical debts I owe her." And with that, she shut the door in my face. Within 48 hours, every single friend and relative had turned their backs on me, entirely poisoned by my mother's calculated lies. For weeks, I lived out of the back of my car, watching my meager funds dwindle to zero. I was cold, starving, and entirely broken. Then, a massive winter snowstorm hit the city. The temperature plummeted to 10 degrees Fahrenheit, and my car battery completely died. Trapped in the freezing metal frame, shivering uncontrollably, a dark despair settled over me. I wanted to give up. But in that valley of absolute weakness, a sudden, blinding spark of pure anger flared inside my chest. I realized that if I died in that car, they would win. And I refused to let them win. I forced myself to keep moving through the night to stay alive. The next morning, I walked for miles through knee-deep snow until I stumbled into a small place called Sunny's Diner. The owner, an older woman named Sunny, took one look at my shivering frame and pulled me inside. She gave me a hot meal, a warm room above the diner, and an immediate job. I worked harder than I ever had in my life, saving every single cent. Eventually, a corporate regular named Mr. Grant noticed my flawless efficiency and problem-solving skills. He was a successful tech entrepreneur looking for an executive assistant. Despite my lack of a formal degree, he hired me on the spot based on raw merit. At his company, I buried myself in the work, pulling 18-hour days and learning the ins and outs of the tech industry. Within 2 years, I designed and coded an innovative app called EcoConnect, which seamlessly paired environmental volunteers with major corporate-funded local projects. The platform exploded globally, and by the time I turned 25, I was a self-made millionaire. But the unresolved questions of my past still haunted me. Why the sudden cruelty? Why the absolute desperation to erase me? I hired a top-tier private investigator, Mr. Black, to uncover the truth. 2 weeks later, he walked into my executive office and laid down a thick folder. "Pamela," he said, "your mother didn't kick you out because of an affair. She kicked you out because of a trust fund." The investigation revealed that my late grandmother had left me a direct inheritance of $3 million, legally set to mature on my 21st birthday. My mother, who held temporary power of attorney, had secretly embezzled over $2 million from that account to fund her lavish lifestyle. She knew that the moment I turned 21, a mandatory legal audit would expose her grand theft. So, she fabricated the story, painted me as an unstable thief, and cast me out, hoping I would disappear or be discredited before I could claim the estate. But the horror didn't stop there. The report showed that they had recently taken in a vulnerable foster child named Lucy strictly for the state stipends. I tracked Lucy down at a local park, and through tears, she confessed how my parents were mistreating her, forcing her to sleep in an unheated basement. That was the moment my pain turned into absolute leverage. I didn't just get mad, I executed a plan. I legally removed Lucy from that house, secured her a safe apartment, and hired the best criminal defense lawyers to file formal child abuse charges against Vivian and Henry. Simultaneously, my investigator discovered that my parents had panicked over the impending legal exposure and dumped their remaining capital into a highly volatile cryptocurrency scam. They lost every single dollar, fell into massive debt, and their primary estate went into foreclosure. Quietly, through an anonymous holding company, I bought out their entire mortgage from the bank and personally authorized the immediate foreclosure on their home. Now, back in the present, I watch from my window as their cheap rental car comes to a halt next to my luxury vehicle. My mother steps out first, looking incredibly old, haggard, and defeated. The moment her eyes lock onto me standing on the steps, she freezes in absolute shock. Pamela, she stammers, her voice trembling. You live here." I look down at her, completely unfazed. "Yes, Vivian, I do. And I know absolutely everything. I know about Grandma's trust fund, I know about your theft, and I know exactly what you did to Lucy." Her face drains of all color, and she instantly bursts into desperate, manipulative tears. "Pamela, please, we made a horrible mistake. We've been looking for you for years." I let out a dry, echoing laugh. "Stop lying, you threw me out like garbage to cover up your federal crimes. You systematically tried to destroy my life." My father steps out of the car, his old arrogance flaring up through his desperation. "We are still your parents, Pamela. You have a moral obligation to help us." I reach into the pocket of my tailored blazer, pull out a single slip of paper, and walk down the steps. I drop it directly at their feet. It's a crisp, $50 bill. "There," I say, my voice steady and cold. $50, that is the exact amount you gave me when you locked me out in the dark. That is officially all I will ever owe you. Now, get off my property." Enraged, my mother lunges forward, but Leo instantly steps in, blocking her entirely. "Escort them off the premises," I order smoothly. "If they ever set foot on this property again, have them immediately arrested for criminal trespassing." As I watch their cheap rental car speed away through the security gates, I feel an incredible, physical weight lift entirely off my shoulders. A few weeks later, the district attorney officially moved forward with the evidence I provided. My mother was convicted of grand theft and elder financial abuse, receiving a mandatory 5-year prison sentence. Unwilling to go down with her, my father filed for divorce and moved into a cramped, single-room apartment on the edge of town. As for me, I bought my old childhood home back from the bank, completely gutted the interior, and transformed it into a fully funded crisis center for abandoned youth, naming it The Haven. It is now a place where kids who have been cast aside can find safety, resources, and a real chance to build a future. Looking back at the journey, I finally realized the ultimate truth about betrayal. The absolute best revenge isn't watching your enemies suffer. The best revenge is standing tall, building an extraordinary life entirely on your own terms, and finally finding your peace.